Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Nishcast. It's your boy, the Diggity Doo Doc, Mr. Peptoy Panther, Mr. Slippers, entering summer, so we're going to swap over to the Chandos for a bit of the heat, although it is pissing down in Okalangi, and we are here with the Wobbly Wildcard for another episode of the Niche Cast, coming to you via the Niche Cache, where we write and talk about Kiwis sporting matters. We are on Patreon, and the best way to support the Niche Cache is on Patreon. Shout out to all our patrons. We record a little pre-podcast kōrero for our patrons, and today's one was all about the All Blacks. All Blacks defeating the All Blacks drawing with the Wallabies. 16 points all. So we talked about that in the Patreon podcast. So jump on Patreon and you get stuff like that delivered to you. Little bit of underground shit coming at you. We also do an email. It comes out Mondays and Fridays, so sign up to that if you like it. On today's episode, we're going to chat through, we've got NRL Finals happening. This is the last episode before the start of the Plunket Shield, which is next week. So we're going to talk through the Plunket Shield. We've got some local footy as well with the Premiership footy, and I'm sure the Wildcard will update us on what's happening on the global sphere as he delivers the flying Kiwis. Wobbly Wildcard, kia ora to yourself. How are you?
Yeah, man, it's been one of them weeks for me so far, only a couple days into it, but it's been one of them weeks so far where it feels like trying to be productive is like dragging your gumboots through the mud. It's just like constant, what do you call them? Just little barriers, small barriers, but little barriers along the way, which is doing weird things to my head. But it's good to get a decent podcast and like, I won't go through the whole. I'm not going to go through the whole rank and file and whatever, but like. For example, little icing on the cake this morning was when I got home, went to pull into the old driveway, and then I couldn't because there was a car parked across it. So I drove up around down the road a little bit, and these country roads takes a little while before you actually come to another street or whatever where you can actually like turn around with any space with bloody cars zipping past you with the old open speed limit. And like, come swing back around, car's still there. I saw that she had been on her phone, so I figured she's just looking for directions, and then I was like, okay, she'll be gone when I get back. She wasn't, so I pull into like bloody grassy ditch in front, because I can't get the car up the driveway otherwise. I go over and talk and say, you're all right there, you're all good? And she's like, yeah, no, it should be all right. Called my cousin, she's coming to pick me up. Just like my accelerator pedal broke, and I said it broke, and she's like, yeah, and then she pulled it up and like held it in front of me, and like the accelerator pedal was not plugged into the car or whatever. Like it was, I can't say I'd ever seen that before in my life. But then I was like, she's like, should I move the car back or something? We can roll it off so you can get through it. I'm like, well, there's not really anywhere to go. I'm like, bugger it, I'll just walk up the driveway and come back in 20 minutes when you're done or whatever and move the car back up then. So I did. Driveway is like 250 meters uphill, but I enjoy the walk, so I didn't have a drama with that. Walk up, have a shower, have some breakfast, go back down. She's still there. Her cousin's there now, and they're trying to, I figured their cousin was coming to like tow the car or something. And she's like, the both of them are sitting there, and she's got her like 8-year-old kid or something in the front seat as well with her. And they're all trying to like reattach this accelerator pedal. So I went to drive up out. They'd back the car up just enough so I could probably get through. I went to drive. I thought I could just swing up the grassy edge, and I was just revving the engine with the car half. I'd like, no, that's not working. Move a little bit further up where the sort of ditch is a little bit not so steep. Revving again, can't get up the hill. Okay, a little bit more. Nope. Okay, so back all the way back around. Reverse back onto the street, swing around, come back up. Done. Park. You guys all good? You almost done or whatever? You like they said they're almost done. I'm like, you're all good? You need a hand or anything? And she's like, no, we're all good. I'm just going to go down the road to the shop and get some glue. So that was where I left them. And as far as I know, I assume they're not still there now a couple hours later, but little bit of drama on a Tuesday morning. It's one I haven't experienced before, is the old accelerator pedal falling off. It's a new one for me.
And knowing you as I do, I'm confident you'd have no idea how to whip an accelerator pedal back onto its thing that it's attached to, because I've got no fucking clue. Like, I'm
absolutely no clue. I would have. My idea of offering help was that I had a phone, I could have called the AA or something like that. But they seemed confident that they had it under control at every opportunity. They didn't bloody seem to, but we'll see how it goes. If they're still there when I go out this afternoon, then maybe I'll just have to like take matters into my own hands and don't have a tow bar on my car, but whatever.
I think we've all been there where, whatever car you've got, probably when you're a, teenager, early 20s throughout New Zealand, your car just has some ailment that doesn't stop you, or that doesn't stop the car from being of use to you. Like, you can still use the car, but you might just have to deal with some sort of issue. The classic being the windows that you can't wind down, so then you got to open the door at the drive-through. Like, that's just a small vintage example.
The radio that doesn't work, all those kind of things.
Yeah, although every time you do this, something happens and you just got to put up with it and all that shit. So shout out to those people, and shout out to everyone who has lost their accelerator pedal in the act of driving. I'd rather lose my accelerator than my brake, though, Wildcard. That's for sure.
That is actually a very fair point.
Well, Wildcard, I was kind of running through a clutch pedal NBA Finals little link there, but
it's in there somewhere, and listeners can make that leap themselves. The old segue, that's what they call them. Insert your own segue here.
How'd you feel about Los Angeles Lakers? They wrapped up the NBA championship, kind of in demonstrative fashion. Miami Heat did all they could to get to that point. Since we last recorded, there were a couple of nice games from Jimmy Butler. Different players from the Heat did a few things, and then I think it was Game 6 yesterday. Los Angeles Lakers just wrap it up. You got any thoughts, ideas, insights that you want to offer on? Like, it does get a bit weird when you're trying to offer, insights into NBA matters from your driveway where someone's lost their accelerator pedal in New Zealand. But what'd you think of the whole? Well, that's it. How about that? That's it. The NBA bubble's over. NBA season's over. We don't even know when the next NBA season's going to be. We've talked a bit about the weird American matters, but we'll keep it strictly sports for this. But just how'd you feel? Like, Los Angeles Lakers NBA bubble is over. To me, I've got a weird connection with Los Angeles, and a lot of whether it was Nipsey Hussle dying, or obviously then, over the last 3 years, I've had Mac Miller, Nipsey Hussle, and Kobe Bryant die, all of which have been kind of massive parts of my borderline childhood through my teenage years. And then, so Nipsey Hussle, he's a Los Angeles legend. He passed away. Kobe Bryant passes away. It just seems only right that the Lakers perhaps wrapped up that cycle and winning the NBA championship in the bubble. How are you feeling just at the end of this whole NBA bubble? I was thinking out maybe the cycle is part of the COVID cycle, but it seems as though COVID's still ravaging a couple of countries in the world. So I don't want to go that far, but it does feel like a bit of a cycle has ended with various Los Angeles matters, and then obviously the cycle that is the NBA season, and more importantly, the NBA bubble.
Yeah, 0 positive tests throughout the whole NBA bubble experience. So you can't fault the administrative side of any of that. It's just the most incredible thing that they were able to organize all of that, make it all happen, and then that it works so well as well is absolutely crazy. especially when you're seeing like the NFL is struggling, having to delay games. MLS has been delayed. Like Michael Boxall's team have a couple players now. Might even be him. They haven't actually said who the players were that tested positive. There's 2 New Zealanders in there, and they said 2 of them tested positive. So, law of averages says it's probably not Boxall and James Musa, but either way, they had to postpone their most recent game, which isn't very fun. And yet, the NBA was able to do this whole big old season restart thing, which is pretty incredible. And ultimately, the best team won. Like, people can make like, and it was a great playoff experience throughout the whole thing. It maybe didn't end in the best final series just because, I mean, it might have. Miami had the capabilities of, they were always going to be the underdogs there, but they're the kind of team that likes being the underdogs, so they might have been capable of doing something. But I mean, Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic both getting injured in that first game kind of screwed things up and just dug them so much of a hole to come out of, despite Jimmy Butler's overwhelming heroics. And yeah, like the bit, like LeBron James is still one of, like, at the age of almost 36, he is like, it's really tiresome, the fact that he wins a title, so now everyone has to bring up the Michael Jordan comparison. And obviously Michael Jordan had a pretty big 2020 as well himself, with his big sort of resurgent public persona with the Last Dance doco and all that, and that's probably not a coincidence either in some sort of wider picture frame of thinking. But like the obviously the whole GOAT debate thing is incredibly tiresome because A, it's a matter of opinion, so it's not like you can prove it one way or another, and B, it's just, why is that the thing to focus on? Like, look at everything else that like all the other amazing things that happened throughout this NBA playoffs, and like Jimmy Butler catapulting himself into superstardom now, which is just vindicating every team that let him go because they couldn't handle him or whatever in the past, and now they're still struggling to make playoffs and figuring out and firing coaches and all these things, Minnesota and Philadelphia in particular. So like that was amazing, and what the Miami Heat did as well, the point to be hammered home about them, before I say a word or two on the Lakers, is like the Miami Heat aren't going anywhere. This is their sort of big, I suppose, announcement or whatever, or like, but like, look at what they did. This doesn't have to be one of those sort of like one and done kind of, like, there's no reason they won't be even better next season, because you look at them, they've got Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, 2 rookies playing very big minutes. Those guys are automatically going to get better from this. Duncan Robinson, a guy in his first full season, I think he played the year before, but it was also like mixing with G League stuff. So he's like, all 3 of those are big breakout players. Jimmy Butler's not doing anything less next. Like, Bam Adebayo this was his breakout season as well, as showing what a like supremely skilled big man he is, and like that is a strong team who are going to be able to sign a couple key players as well. In free agency, no doubt. Like, players are going to want to play for that team. Plus, they already have a young core and a established superstar like Miami, and not to mention one of the best coaches in the league as well. And Eric Spoelstra, I'm so glad for him, because he got, like, when he was winning titles with them the first time round with like the Big Three and all that, obviously the focus goes on the Big Three, and I think people didn't realize just what an excellent coach Spoelstra was. Like, it's one of those things, people knew it, but people didn't really talk about it so much. And now that's been like proved beyond a doubt once more, which is cool for him after having a few sort of down years, trying to rebuild this team without ever bottoming out. And the fact that they got to where they are, it just is, again, vindicating of that as well. Like, vindicating for the Heat, vindication for Pat Riley, vindication for Jimmy Butler. It's good from them, and they'll keep coming back. As to the Los Angeles Lakers, it's LeBron James, and he just makes finals whatever he does, and he was probably always going to win this. And yeah, it does have like a romantic streak with the some of the more emotional aspects of this, and those things are cool. Like, we don't ignore the narratives in sport because they're a part of the experience of watching and following and everything. LeBron James, another Finals MVP as well, and deservedly so. Like, he consistently took over at every point where they needed him to, and the fact he's still doing this almost age 36 is literally incredible. Like, you can't say enough sort of superlatives about the fella and everything he's achieved. But also, like, he did this very much like 1A, 1B with Anthony Davis, who was supreme throughout these playoffs. And he's like, when you have, like, there's often that talk about how you need multiple superstars to be able to win a title, because most of the top competing teams have at least one. And Anthony Davis is a top 5 player in the NBA. So, like, LeBron James is obviously one of those as well. And it's probably one of those things, talking about vindication for the Heat, vindication for Anthony Davis too, who maybe didn't, I mean, it's one of those ones like Spoelstra, where everyone knew how good he was. It's just we hadn't been able to see just how good he was at the very, like, business end of the season, because those New Orleans Pelicans teams weren't as good as they could have been, and they didn't really build the squad around him that they could have. But Jesus, he's a good player. And then you just, like, when you've got that in place, the rest of it's not easy, but they make it look easy because players want to play with LeBron. LeBron gets a bunch of what look like mismatched veterans in a lot of ways. Guys like Rondo and they have a Morris twin, don't they? Or no, that might have been, I can't remember where the other one. But also, like, even Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was Danny Green as well. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was banging down 3-pointers, and he's a guy who was being, like, laughed at times. And like Caruso as well, the White Mamba. Like, this is a team where if you put basically any other player other than LeBron, like, no matter how good they might be, I'm not sure this team could reach the same levels that they did. And then as well, to find a coach in Frank Vogel who can come in, set up, it's like, a lot of things are taken care of by themselves when you've got LeBron and you've got a lot of, like, intelligent veteran players around. But he comes in, he hammers home a defensive mindset as well. And honestly, it was their defense that won them that game 6 and won them so convincingly. Like, at one point, I think it was either late in the second quarter or early in the third quarter. I remember the commentators saying, like, Miami only have, like, 2 extra field goals than they do turnovers in this game. Like, that's insane. And it was all stemming from how well the Lakers were defending them. And that, a lot of that comes from Frank Vogel as well. So, like, he didn't need to be superstar coach doing everything, but he needed to be able to hammer home, like, we don't win this just at one end only. Like, and all of those things, it almost felt so, I think this is why maybe a lot of the conversation is about LeBron versus Jordan, because maybe this Lakers championship doesn't feel as sort of heroic and sort of, I don't know, just like enjoyable as maybe, for example, the story of how Toronto did it last year, and the way the Warriors built from within with their like that sort of Curry, Clay, Draymond core that they had there, and I don't know, maybe it just did feel too formulaic in a way. Like, you get LeBron and then everything else takes care of itself. But I think that's sleeping on just how much fine balancing's got to go. And like, I think if you take most of those guys outside of, in fact, all of those guys, like every single player on that Lakers roster who doesn't have the last name James or Davis, and you put them on another team, I don't think they play as well as they did throughout this playoff series. I think every single player is being, and it's not every game, like Rondo has a great game 6. He was terrible in a couple other games. Like, that's how it goes. The different role players step up at different times, and the Lakers just had so many of them. And the fact that everyone was able to contribute at some point, or basically everyone, I just don't think that fact is going to get anywhere near as much acknowledgement as it should, because it's one of those, like, LeBron doesn't just dominate the court, he makes everyone else around him play better too. And that is the definition of a superstar, really. And I guess that's probably where the focus ought to be after that NBA Finals, eh?
I'm trying to think of, like, ideas that can be connected to, like, Kiwi sport or just the wider sports landscape. And the thing that I kept coming back to was, in connection to your focus on LeBron James there, LeBron James is the best passer of a basketball in the NBA. And that encompasses so many different little traits, little different skill sets, physical stature as well. And it's very hard to see and quantify a lot of those things, like vision. It's very hard to quantify the vision and intuition and those things that you need in a team sport. So it's not something that springs to top of mind. Like, they mention it in the commentary all the time because you see, like, LeBron James, any position, can find an open man. Doesn't matter what kind of pass he has to use. Doesn't matter what area of the court he's in. He's the best passer, bar none. So to take it forward into like a wider conversation about sports, like, how do you view passing as a skill set? Because like in rugby or rugby league or rugby union, passing is never mentioned as something that differentiates players from other players. Like, oh, he's an amazing passer, so like he's better than that player. However, what does every player have to do? They need to pass the ball. It is, as I'm rolling through like this idea off the top of my head, like a lot of when you see big men in rugby and rugby league passing, that's a skill set that catches your eye. Like if you got a big prop in the NRL in the middle of the field doing subtle passes, or if you're seeing Patrick Tuipulotu fire a 10-meter cutout pass, that catches your eye. In soccer, you've got the guys like Andrea Pirlo, just a long ball master, all the different passes they can do. Passing is something that is crucial in team sports. Perhaps the most important thing, but it's not viewed that way. Like, you tend to look at more like points, or I can't think of another example, but points is like the main thing, or like tackle busts or their run meters. But no one looks at the passing combinations and the effort you have to go through to build the intuition, to build the chemistry, and then you can have the execution of the passes. Like, what do you think about all of that? Like, obviously it starts with LeBron James. He's the best basketball player in the world, arguably the best professional athlete in the world as well, not in terms of like athletes and athletics and how fast he runs or stuff like that, but he's just the best. He's the best in his league, which puts him in rare air on a global landscape, because that puts you in like Ronaldo and Messi and Andrew Johns, if that was for Cameron Smith, sorry, in a more current events kind of time. So if you're the best player in your league, you're already one of few on the international landscape. I would say LeBron's the best out of all those leagues, though, because he does everything, and that includes being like just an amazing passer of the basketball.
Yeah, passing sort of hits on a couple different levels, eh? Like there's the in football, for example, passing often equals control, and like there's in the way of like being able to dominate a game, you're generally going to be the team who completes more passes, because it means that you're moving the opposition around, you're dictating where the game takes place, like how close to the, like, you know, if you're setting up passing around in the opposition half, for example, a lot harder for them to score if they're defending their goal. And sometimes that is taken quite far, and you get teams that pass a lot and don't actually create a lot. And then other teams you get who don't want to pass a lot because they want to have room to attack into, invite the team forward, win the ball, attack straight away. It all comes down to like sort of ideas about passing. I guess it's one of those things where, like, if you're passing the ball, you're giving the ball to someone else, just on a really basic, simplistic level. It's passing, like it is passing is passing. And that's sort of like, because a good example of this is the very end of Game 5 of that NBA Finals, where LeBron goes to attack the rim. 3 guys come forward, plus a 4th help defender as well. Like basically 4 people in his vicinity. Before, if he's trying to charge towards the rim, he could pull up and shoot from sort of mid-range. What he did instead was he kicked the ball out to a wide open Danny Green, who then missed the shot. that was a great look for Danny Green. He probably, you can't say he should have made the shot because sometimes he missed shots. Like, no one really shoots better than 50% from 3-pointers. The very best players will, from, if you specify like being that far open at the top of the key, there'll be guys who can hit 60 or whatever, I don't know. But still, that's a high percentage chance of missing that shot, even if you are wide open, even if you are a very good 3-point shooter. That's kind of how the sport works. So, like, it was just weird how you got this kind of bandwagon criticism of, and I know I'm talking about like echo chambers on Twitter and stuff, so it's not really real, but there still was a bit of a backlash to, oh, Michael Jordan would have shot that though. It's like, yeah, and maybe he would have missed. Like, Danny Green had a wide open shot and it was a great pass from LeBron James. Like, there's nothing wrong with that play. You just miss a shot sometimes. That's kind of how it goes. But the idea that he passed, therefore it's like differential or something, like he didn't want the big moment at the end. It's like, LeBron's had plenty of big moments. He made the right play, which is the thing. And it's the teams that have that kind of attitude as well. Like, that kind of, like, you remember when the Spurs were really dominant sort of 10 years ago, and they always were famous for making that extra pass. And it's like, you've got a good shot, but kick it around the corner once more and you've suddenly got a great shot. That kind of attitude, and great football teams tend to be those ones who do dominate possession, but it's also the quality of passes, I suppose, as well, and being able to, like, so many great, the football is probably one sport where you actually get a lot of credit, like, you do actually get a lot of credit for making a cutting edge pass kind of thing, splitting the defense, and those kind of plays, people do like adore that kind of thing. You'll get plenty of highlight treatment from that. But yeah, even throughout, even like those little simple ones, like in what you're talking about in rugby league, for example, a backline move, just every player having a sufficient skill set to be able to catch pass, maybe hold it for just a split second longer to draw the defender in, then pass, or maybe you don't even get that, the defender's rushing in, so it's just got to be like a little shovel pass straight on. Like, just having those skill sets are essential, and then whoever scores the try at the end of it, they've scored the try, they get that stat next to their name, but you score the try because of the work that your whole team did in getting to that point generally. And it's the same in football. You might score a bicycle kick, but someone had to put the cross in. Like, you still had to get to that area. You had to have the ball in the right part of the field for this opportunity to arise. And basketball, I guess you do get to count assists as well, which is nice. So you do get players who actually want to pass and want to pad the stats and a little bit in that matter. But it's all about making the right play. And LeBron is one guy who has an incredibly good balance between those kind of things: when to score, when to pass, when to do all of these things. And it's not just the pass, it's the extra pass, it's the whole move that goes into it. It's all very, like, I think you find the teams that are very good at that are the teams who have that team first mentality. So it's probably symbolic of all that, I think, probably. Like, where passing is maybe not the most, like, dramatically in the spotlight kind of thing you can do, but it's also, just speaking on like a personal level of just like club trainings and stuff like that, I kind of find like it's one thing when someone like cuts the ball back to you at the edge of the area, you take a touch, you put it in the bottom corner. That's cool. Like, you've done what you wanted to do. It's awesome. But the best goals that you score are the ones where it's like just passing moves where everyone's moving in the right direction and the defense just had no chance of stopping you. And there's like 3 or 4 players involved, maybe even more. And like, that is the most fun. Like, that is the peak, like the aesthetic peak of sport is when all that is happening. That's, I don't know. That's a couple thoughts on passing at least. I'll pass it back over to you now.
Pass the footy.
There it is.
That was just like, the whole time I was thinking, what is there anything you learned from the NBA bubble, the Lakers winning the final series that can be applied to anything in New Zealand sport? I was struggling to find examples. That's why I went to the passing route, but I'm not sure if there's anything immediately that pops up from your experience watching the NBA Finals and building a team. As you said, the Miami Heat, different style, to the Lakers building a team. anything that applies to like New Zealand kind of sports, whether it's a specific team, a specific sport, or just the general kind of sports culture?
Other than the stuff we already touched on, not really. I don't know. I mean, throw out a bunch of generic stuff about LeBron, about Anthony Davis working his way to and combinations and all whatever, but that's sort of well-trod turf. I don't know. The main thing I've got isn't a like Kiwi sports comparison. I just think the NBA is in a really kind of fascinating place right now. It's probably sort of like what you're saying about before about like it does feel like the end of a cycle or the beginning of a new cycle. It's hard to know which one of those two things it is. I suppose it could be both. Where it's like the Golden State Warriors are going to be back next season, right? Steph Curry's going to be healthy again, Klay Thompson's going to be healthy again, Draymond Green, they're going to get a high draft pick, which they're either going to use or trade for another like top quality player to put with them. That's going to have them back in contention. Whether they're anywhere near as good as they once were, they will still at least be a very strong playoff team who no one wants to face, and they might like top aspiration ceilings. They might well, be in contention to win another championship. You've got teams like Milwaukee and the Clippers, the Bucks and the Clippers both had very disappointing exits. Shaken up from that, there's going to be responses from there. Those are teams who underperformed, who should do better. Teams like, Brooklyn as well, with Sean Marks in charge there, and now Steve Nash coaching, and KD will be back. Kyrie Irving should be healthy. They've got a pretty exciting team. Dallas are coming in with Doncic and Porzingis, and like there's just Toronto as well, a young team that's getting better. Boston, a young team that should keep getting better. Philadelphia, a young team who's now got a very good coach who should get better, but you never quite know with the 76ers. Like, I'm sure I'm missing plenty of teams as well. I've already mentioned how the Miami Heat aren't going to drop off any. LA Lakers, as long as Anthony Davis re-signs, which I can't really imagine him not doing, they're also going to be very good. You had teams like Denver, who had really strong playoffs. You got teams like, I was going to say Memphis, with a lot of young players looking very good, but they're probably a few years before getting to this level. But like, the NBA is in a place where I don't know if you could call it a transitional phase or not. I just think it's in a state where there are a lot of very good teams, and maybe not all those teams did everything that they could this year for whatever reason. For the Nets, it's just because injuries didn't allow them to. For a team like Dallas, they just weren't far enough along yet. They still needed a year or two. But it's really hard to predict what's going to happen next season, and that's pretty much what you want from a league, eh? Like, the Lakers are the team to beat now. The Lakers were the best team this season. Deserved champions, can't really complain about any of that, but they have to sustain it next year against what's going to be a stronger field, I think, and that's exciting to me.
It's also exciting to have a bit of local footy coming this summer in Aotearoa. The insert sponsor here, whatever it's called, with the Aotearoa Premiership, which you're always front and center with every year. Is there anything different about the football premiership coming up this summer? How are you feeling about it? Obviously, they probably don't have a whole bunch of information on squads and stuff like that, so I can't pick your brain about like what kind of footballers are playing, because I am watching the like rugby league premiership in Aotearoa when those games are on the TV, and there's like a couple players from different NRL clubs or different reserve grade clubs who have had to come back to New Zealand, and they're playing locally. Most interestingly, there is this kid, Samisi Sakei, who's from Auckland, and I knew he was there is a Samisi Sakei, I'm not completely sure it's the same dude, but he was with Cronulla Sharks, and he played like a couple games at prop for the Cronulla Sharks Jersey Flegg under 18 team. And now he appears to be on the wing for the county's Manukau team. That's just one of a few different funky bits and bobs that I've noted with the local premiership, but I say that because I guess when the football premiership starts up, there might be a few lads who were meant to be overseas. They might be playing locally or whatever it is. But what are you got to say about the release of the draw and just the approach of the men's premiership, football premiership in Aotearoa?
I mean, the main thing to say is just echoing what you said about the rugby league, which is that all those same things apply here, and we're like, you're not. I mean, there's one added thing is that you'd normally get a decent chunk of international players playing in the Premiership, who presumably will not be there because, as you say, like we're a little way away from getting squad information. It's one of those things where like the teams probably know who they're signing, players know where they're playing, or most of them is anyway, and I could probably guess at a lot of the players who would like where they would play, but until we get announcements, can't exactly say anything. I'm not going to be like make a dick of myself with those things. And well, yeah, that's one of those wait and see ones as far as that goes. But we do finally have a draw for it, and there should be like, and the only international players that'll be here are the ones who are permanent residents, presumably. So that is like your international players are normally often amongst the best. Not exclusively the best, because a lot of strong, very talented Kiwi dudes within the various squads, but that does maybe take off a bit of the scrape off a bit of the icing on the top of the just talent pool. However, we saw that with the NBL basketball as well, didn't we? We didn't have international players, but what we got instead was this really hungry terror of just generally younger Kiwi dudes just absolutely raging to get an opportunity and to be able to play first of all just to be able to play full stop amongst everything else that was going on, and then just to take this opportunity to show what they're capable of, where they're boosted up a couple spots in the depth charts because they don't have those 2 or 3 imports that normally come in and take the last shot or whatever in a close game, and suddenly that's fallen to a 22-year-old New Zealand point guard or something like that or whatever, and all that same excitement. I'm hoping, and I'm always an optimist when it comes to the Premiership, but I'm hoping we'll see a lot of that kind of energy coming through in this. When it does start, it starts mid-November, so we're about a month away exactly, and there are a couple changes that need describing. Most things should be about the same. Format's still the same. It'll be top 4 through semi-finals, and then a grand final in March. However, because of the various financial implications of everything, they are missing 2 teams. Tasman United appear to have folded entirely. I'm not sure we'll get them back even down the line when things are a little bit clearer. And Southern United haven't folded, but they have decided to take a gap year. And as such, there will only be one South Island team, which is a bit weird and pretty disappointing, but at the same time, just on a purely business perspective, it probably does make it a little bit cheaper for some of these other teams, I suppose. So, no idea how that works, but Canterbury United are technically going to be representing the entirety of the South Island, so players who would be playing for Southern or Tasman are now also part of this Canterbury team if they're wanted, if they're required. I actually, again, until we get a draw, no bloody idea, but I still think that is going to be a Canterbury team that looks a lot like the Canterbury team they had last year. You take a couple of the better young players from Southern. Southern actually, though, a lot of the, they have a strong Irish contingent the last 4 or 5 years. Most of those guys have all gone back now. I think Garvin Coughlin might still be around, but other than that, they've pretty much all gone back. So, Southern were down to half a squad anyway, arguably. Yeah, they do have some very good young fellas who will hopefully get a good crack with Canterbury. Tasman as well. I don't know that there'd be more than 2 or 3 players who would be like absorbed into that Canterbury thing. But I mean, like, it's a wait and see again. Like, all of these things with the bloody draws and now the squads, we don't know until we actually get them. But that's the state of it. Other than that, like, Wellington Phoenix has still got their youth team in there. Hawke's Bay, Waitakere, Hamilton, Eastern Suburbs, Team Wellington, Auckland City, they're all back. So we should still get something close to... I mean, we'll still get a full, exciting, enjoyable season with a lot of extremely good Kiwi players on offer, doing what they can do. There's also, where are we here? There's also the, you mentioned the insert sponsor here. They've actually been able to re-up on their sponsor with the old ISPS Hunters, whatever the hell they are. They're just a funding type organization, I think, but... somewhere in here I have it written when it's going to start. The Women's Premiership have also been incorporated into that sponsorship as well. So they're now known, instead of being just the National Women's League, it's now called the ISBS Hunter Women's Premiership. So that's a pretty common sense sort of integration there. I don't know why that's been on the outer... I don't know why that wasn't done 5 years ago, but whatever, at least it's done now. The ISPS Hunter Women's Premiership will begin on the weekend of the 31st of October, 1st of November. So, 2.5 weeks before that one starts. This is, unlike the Men's Premiership, they have retained all their teams. So that's the positive. On the negative, in order to pay for all that, I suppose, they've cut it back to just a single round robin. So 7 teams will play 6 games each, and then first and second go straight into a grand final, which will take place the week before Christmas. So the whole thing's over in less than 2 months, and it's only 1 round, which is all a bit frustrating, but that's it's better than not having a competition. That's whatever they got to do. You never quite know what to say when it comes to New Zealand football decisions that involve in some way or another money and paying for stuff. But here we are, and we should still get, we will still get 2 strong, highly competitive Premiership football seasons. So that much is something to be excited for.
What is the pick of the action on the Flying Kiwis mat from around the world at the moment? They'll be published by the time you're listening to it, so you're back and forth writing. What's the juiciest thing you've got there?
The juiciest thing is probably Winston Reid. I mean, he popped up midweek last week with a winning goal, sort of like 20 minutes to go or something like that, against Elliot Collier's team, actually. Winston Reid with the big old back post header, just doing what Winston Reid does, basically, a very Reedy kind of goal. Picked up a couple yellow cards in 2 of his last 3 games as well for rather physical challenges. Getting in amongst the rough stuff as well, and playing, I think he's played 90 minutes in each of their last 3 games as well, and really, like, he was an MLS Team of the Week for the week when he scored that goal as well. So, I mean, this is all... It's MLS. It's a couple step below what we know he's done in the past. But after all the injuries that Reedy's had, like, it's not one of those ones you can really take for granted. So just to see him playing consistently, and not just consistently, but, like, being aggressive and getting stuck in and doing the like, dirty defensive stuff, that has been so much fun to see, because it's the Winston Reid of old. And honestly, like, the Winston Reid, if he sustains that level of play for the rest of the season, he's going to absolutely dominate the MLS. And he's already on a pretty strong team, who I think Sporting Kansas City, they haven't been held scoreless in any game all season, and now they've got one of the best centre backs in the league. And if he can stay fit and keep doing this, then that's a strong team. Like, that's a team that's going to win some playoff games and go deep into the competition. Outside of Winston, it was an international break this week. This is the week that the All Whites were going to have played Belgium. So, not a lot of, like, none of the fellas who play at sort of top tier leagues around the place did, but it does mean there was a bit of a spotlight for for the women's players, where like Rhea Percival scored her first goal for Tottenham in a League Cup game. Hannah Wilkinson scored her first goal and I heard it's pronounced Djurgardens, not pronounced, it's spelt Djurgardens, but I heard her say it in an interview and it's pronounced something completely different to how it looks like it's spelt, so I'm not even going to attempt the proper Swedish pronunciation and embarrass myself there. But she scored, so that was cool. Hannah Wilkinson is a player who I think a lot of football fans' hopes probably rest upon, where like the whole thing about being able to score more goals, a lot of that comes down to being able to get Wilkie scoring more goals and being like the sort of centre forward that you can really play through, and he'll give you like those scrappy ones and make the like. I mean, she hasn't been a high volume scorer, but she is sort of like a target woman striker. So being able to merge those two things is quite important. She's playing at a high level in the top flight in Sweden, but in her first season with this club, she's mostly only played off the bench. So she's getting like 5 minutes this week, quarter of an hour next week, maybe only 2 minutes the week. Like lots of small cameos off the bench. So I think she's played 14 games there and she's only started 2. And the second one of those was this midweek cup game and she scored. So that's what she's there to do. That's what we want to see. The other one I will say is there are a couple of these like Scandinavian type leagues that are coming towards the ends of their seasons. And Ellie Riley at FC Rosengård, they had been winning. They've gone 3 games without a win, so they've actually dropped to second. I think there's about 4 games left, and they're 4 points off top. So they're still they're not in the ideal place, but they're still in with a good chance of winning. CJ Bots, Valerenga, however that's meant to be said as well, in Norway. She hasn't played a lot for them because she's coming back from injury. She's only really played a couple times off the bench. But they are top of the table in Norway, hoping to win that one. And then in the men's stuff, you've got Joel Stevens and Francis De Vries at IFK Värnamo, where Joel Stevens just this morning came off the bench, scored a 79th minute winner for them. They've won about 4 games in a row. They've been cruising through this Swedish, it's the third tier, but it's split in half, so they're on the southern side of it. If they finish first in their division, which they're currently about 7 points clear, although the second place team does have a game in hand, they finish first, they get automatically promoted to the second tier. So it's looking pretty likely that they will. If they can finish the season through the last 7 games left, then they're looking decent for promotion as well. So it was a little bit of a down week in terms of we didn't get like Chris Wood or Sarpreet Singh or Joe Bell or those kind of guys playing. But we still got the peak of the American players. We still got the peak of the Footy Ferns players as well. So, it's plenty of goodness in Flying Kiwis this week as always. There's never any shortage of things to choose from, to be honest. Not these days, anyway.
Definitely not. It's always a rather impressive menu of footballing antics. Would like to see it all concentrated down like into a couple of All Whites games, a couple of Football Ferns games and all that good stuff. But we keep dealing with the smorgasbord that is Flying Kiwis. Do read about it. Obviously, the old wobbly mate here can only pick apart a few bits and bobs, but there's plenty of depth to the Flying Kiwis writing thing that he delivers every single week. Wobbly Wildcard. I talked myself into the Canberra Raiders being too good for the Sydney Roosters on the last episode, and that is what happened. I was kind of nicely surprised there. And to set up this NRL conversation, I was also intrigued to hear Wayne Bennett. There was something written about, Wayne Bennett, after the Rabbitohs defeated the Eels, Wayne Bennett was saying stuff about how he treated his players, with the COVID break, and how some other teams flogged their players during the COVID break. Perhaps he was alluding to what the Eels did. I also know that the Panthers trained very hard through the COVID break, and I'm sure a lot of players did, a lot of teams did. But Wayne Bennett, there was something where he also said that he had like one Zoom call with the players a week during that COVID break. And coming back to the Raiders, So you've got someone like Wayne Bennett who's very good at building into a finals campaign. That's pretty much like Wayne Bennett is, anytime his teams are in like contention, there is a clear building into finals footy. And that's what's happened with the Canberra Raiders as well. So there is an interesting thread here of just how different teams have approached the season and how it's a lot easier for the Panthers and Storm because they've got a rest week built into their final schedule. But you look at what the Raiders have done, they lose Josh Hodgson at some period and they battle like super hard to stay in the mix, to stay in contention, and they're coming home hard. The Rabbitohs, I don't think, are coming in as hot as the Raiders to get to the point of Wayne Bennett talking about how he's managed the season. I guess that's the umbrella here, is managing the season. But the Raiders are the hottest team in the NRL right now because the Panthers and Storm haven't played. Panthers have a whole lot of momentum, but the Raiders, they're a fun team to watch, wildcard, and there's a lot of Kiwi NRL involvements that I can chuck up as well. But from the weekend's games, Eels versus Rabbitohs, Rabbitohs were just too good. The Eels have some holes and perhaps they're a bit tired, but they're just they're not good enough to be in that upper echelon just yet. The Raiders coming in hot, coming in sizzling, momentum, and a style of footy that is very useful as well. Too good for the Roosters. Do you have any thoughts on the Rabbitohs?
My main thoughts from when I as I was watching the game, my main thoughts were just how disappointing the Eels were, to be honest. I kind of think the Rabbitohs did extremely well to take advantage of that. I'm also not sure it sets them up for success against the Panthers, like not through any fault of their own. I thought the Eels kind of let themselves down a little bit there, and that was my main thoughts from that one.
Yeah, so that just goes back to the Eels not quite being as good as some of the other teams, and it is a bit of a bummer just for someone like Dylan Brown. But Hayes Dunster also made his debut in that game, and he was born in Rotorua. He played all his junior age group footy for Australian teams and stuff like that. So that's a bit of a weird eligibility situation there. Just specifically on the Eels, the only thing I will, going back to our Dylan Brown, Mitchell Moses comparison that we've run for a few weeks, Dylan Brown had 17 runs for 164 meters, which is just under that 10 meters per run mark. Mitchell Moses had 5 runs for 46 meters. Again, just under that 10 meter per run mark, but Dylan Brown had 17 of those runs and Mitchell Moses had 5. And they didn't have the best outing together tackling. They did exactly the same tackling, so it's hard to big it up to Dylan Brown there. But that just shows you what Dylan Brown offers as a half. Again, he's not doing the basic duties of Mitchell Moses. Mitchell Moses does all the kicking. Dylan Brown only had 2 kicks. Moses had 12 kicks. But Dylan Brown is the direct runner, and they're just a bit off the class. I think they just lack a bit of that class. They play with a whole lot of energy and vitality and aggression and good attitude and all that stuff, but I just don't quite have the class, have the polish of the other teams, which brings us to semi-finals. Raiders versus Storm, Panthers versus Rabbitohs. We probably both think that the Panthers will be too good for the Rabbitohs, correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then that takes us to Storm Raiders, which is a very... Storm are going to have... We're talking about this before team lists are dropped, but the Storm are probably going to have their full Kiwi NRL crew on deck. Jerome Hughes in the halves, Jesse Bromwich, Nelson Asafa Solomona in the middle, Kenny Bromwich on an edge, Brandon Smith could be an interesting factor here just because he's a bit smaller. And there'll be an interesting matchup because Saliva Havili, I wrote about this with the Monday Morning Dummy Half. I did a big focus on the Canberra Raiders, and Saliva Havili has been a bit all over the show as far as like he started at hooker against the Roosters. And more recently, I think when Josh Hodgson got injured, Saliva Havili started 6 games in a row at hooker, and the Raiders won 5 of those games. But then from there, Ricky Stewart had a bit of a epiphany about Saliva Havili that there was a lot to like with the mobility and leg speed and power that Havili offers as a middle forward. And you look at what the Raiders have done in the last quarter of the season. Corey Harawira-Naira's made the move. He made the move to the Raiders mid-season, and he's come straight into a bench role playing through the middle. And I think he's had 6 runs for 60 meters off the bench in the last 2 games. I think he had 6 runs for 66 meters against the Roosters, which is 11 meters per run. So if you've got a bench player in the middle playing less than 20 minutes, because that's all he does, averaging 10 meters per run, 11 meters per run, that's a very efficient middle forward contribution. So I'm interested in the role that Saliva Havili plays and whether it's a direct matchup with Brandon Smith. Both are from Auckland. Brandon Smith from Waiheke. Saliva Havili's from Manurewa. They can both play hooker, and how's this wild card? They are both international hookers, but they've spent Brandon Smith primarily because he kind of just plays as a middle forward at the moment, where Saliva Havili, 1 week he's playing as a middle forward off the bench, then next week against the Roosters he's starting at hooker. So that's a very interesting matchup to just keep an eye on, not necessarily like Brandon Smith against Saliva Havili, but in the sense of you've got 2 players similar stature, both international hookers, who are doing a slightly different role for their NRL teams. Joseph Tapani's just been on fire. Holy shit. That dude is 2 tries in 2 finals games, massive contributions running the footy, excellent defender as well. Raiders have a couple of funky little players with Jordan Rapana playing at centre. Iosio Soliola does a fantastic veterans job. Like if you're talking about NBA comparisons, Soliola is the Rondo. He's the Markieff Morris, whichever one plays for the Lakers. You know, he's that veteran, maybe more of a JaVale McGee. How about that? Just whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do it, and I'll do it at an excessively high energy. Like Soliola, for a dude in his mid-30s, runs the footy bloody hard, and that's what you want. So you've got Rapana and Soliola chipping in, and then you've got Shans Nickel-Klokstad at fullback, and I am interested on your thoughts on any of those little bits and pieces that I mentioned, but I'm also interested in your thoughts on Shans Nickel-Klokstad wildcard, because I ran a few stats of his for that Monday Morning Dummy Half, and he is on track to match a lot of his stats from last year. So he's got like the same number of try assists, very similar number of line breaks, 8 line breaks to 7 line breaks this year, and 3 try assists in both years, but this year he's only played 20 games. Last year he played 26 games. So everything is better or on track. Like he's averaging another 10 meters per run from last year. So everything is like on track for as good a, if not better, season to last year. And he was the buy of the season last year. He was a January, February arrival at the Raiders last year. Not just let's sign him, we've got him coming in for the whole summer. He's arriving in late November, after the Kiwis have played all their footy, because he did play centre for the Kiwis last year as well. No, this is the off-season prior, sorry. So he's not coming in late November, full summer with the boys, and he's going to build into his NRL season. No, Shans Nickel-Klokstad was training with the Warriors and moved to Canberra like January, February ahead of the season, and then started most games at fullback as the Raiders went to the grand final. Here they are again, and he's doing as much as he did last year, and he's in hot form with the Raiders, and he's almost at a grand final again. Like, how have you looked at Shans Nickel-Klokstad from going like a reserve grade player with the Warriors, can't get a look in anywhere? Everyone's talking about him like he should be playing, but he never got the due chance that he deserved. Goes to the Raiders, grand final in his first year, and pretty damn close to another grand final this year.
He's just been amazing. Like, he was incredibly good. Like, there were two guys who stood out in their Raiders win over the Roosters, and you mentioned both of them. Like, it was Joey Tapine and it's Shans Nickel-Klokstad, who were both just immense. And like, if any, like, there's a couple angles there with Shans Nickel-Klokstad, where it's like, if he does fall into that category now, which I'm sure we've talked about this before, which is actually a way exaggerated. Like, there's nowhere near as many players who legitimately belong in this category as people seem to think there are, but he is one of those ones that got away from the Warriors. Like, that's true, but also at the same time, just like wanting to see a Kiwi NRL player thrive. He's in a better situation at the Raiders. Like, he's not going to take Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's spot at fullback for the Warriors. He has made like the best decision for his career, and then he's proven this year that it wasn't a fluke. Like, he wasn't just a when you get those dudes who just have one incredible year coming out of the blue and no one really expected them, no one saw it coming, and people take ages to respond, and then the second year the scouting goes up and everyone knows, like, this is now a known quantity, this dude, and we're not gonna fall for this again, we're not gonna be caught off guard. And then to be not only repeating his stats from last year, but like doing them at a better efficiency in fewer games is like remarkable. And he was so good in that game against the Roosters, and to be peaking in playoffs as well is another one of those signs of just a great player. And it's not like, I think his run meters were through the roof. I haven't got the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he had like heaps. and then also on top of that, there was at least one like try-saving tackle as well. Dude was just everywhere, and it looked like he was cramping up with like 20 minutes to go, and it's like, yeah, I'm not even surprised the amount of ground he's covered. And then Tapine as well, just like that try he scored, which I've seen like plenty of. It was one of those ones where they'll like play it on the TV news and be like, and by the way, Kiwi back rower Joey Tapine scores one of the all-time great NRL playoff tries, and like it's not an all-time great NRL Finals try if there's no defense in front of you. It's like, do you remember when Jared Haynes scored that legendary one against the Dragons, where he just like stepped the entire team 3 times over? And it's like, if the defense is that bad, though, you sort of need to take a step back. But I mean, you still got to be the dude to try it, and like, yeah, great try. And Tapine was incredible, and CNK was incredible as well. It's just one of the, like, my hype levels for the Raiders went from somewhere hovering around like maybe a 40% to like 80%, which is about just a little bit below the Storm hype levels because of the Kiwi NRL stocks that they have. So, I mean, that game is the first one, I think that's Friday night at 10 p.m. That Storm Raiders. That is like must watch Kiwi sports viewing right there, right?
Definitely is. The funniest thing about the whole Shans Nickel-Klokstad situation was that, so Andrew McFadden is the Warriors coach, and then Stephen Kearney comes in, and I think McFadden stayed on as an assistant coach, and then McFadden left to join the Raiders, and that was the summer that Shans Nickel-Klokstad went to the Raiders. So, like, no, I don't want to overlook the funk in the fact that Andrew McFadden, I think he's either the defensive or attacking coach for the Raiders. Well, he was last year with the grand final run, which is good enough for me. I don't know what his exact role is this year, but he's an assistant coach still. He leaves the Warriors and helps the Raiders get to a grand final. Like, that's pretty funny in itself. And he was probably a key figure in getting Nickel Klokstad to the Raiders, because he would have seen Nickel Klokstad every week, and he would know there's this really good kid at the Warriors. He's been training under Tuivasa Sheck, but he's not getting a run. Like, you should get him here. And Nickel Klokstad didn't go to the Raiders as like a starting fullback. No, he earned that in a small window training there. So shout out to Andrew McFadden. Like, it's weird how shit works out, but he's obviously moved onwards and upwards from his time with the Warriors. Because everything.
Shout out to all those types of people, because every time there's a big transfer, there's someone behind the scenes who helps facilitate it, and they don't always hear about that. It's like, the first example that comes to my head is like what Kenny McFadden did for Steven Adams' career. It's like, there's no Steven Adams without him. There's no Steven Adams grabbing rebounds in the NBA playoffs. Doesn't happen without like Kenny McFadden and a number of other people who help along the way. Shout out to all the influencers behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely not the social media influencers, but the
not those ones.
Actual influencers. I'm just like you. I'm frothing about the Raiders. It is unfortunate that they're playing the Storm because, again, just like you, I'd say I'm a heartier Storm fan than you are. But we both appreciate. I'm in constant fascination with the Melbourne Storm as a sports club. But the Raiders are very interesting themselves. You mentioned that's the other thing with Nickel Klokstad, like his defense. I think he had 2 try-saving tackles, and there's no... All that stuff is just purely from memory because there's no like stat to help that out. But I will chuck this one out here, Wildcard. Shans Nickel Klokstad hasn't missed a tackle in the 2 finals games thus far. So he's making all of his tackles, and yeah, that's not a perfect science because he's a fullback and there's no stat for try-saving tackles. But he's done that in the last 2 finals games, and he's had 3 line breaks in the last two games, both of which are finals. Joseph Tapine has scored a try in both finals games as well. So very interesting to see how them and their team are hitting a next level in the finals footy. And that's a really interesting development to their game. And you said, like, there's no second year syndrome for Shans Nickel Klokstad there at fullback. Because you imagine after last year, like, it's not a second year in the NRL, but teams have a whole set of tapes as to how the Raiders play and how the Raiders use Shans Nickel Klokstad, because he's not like Clint Gutherson or Billy Slater, who have the silky hands out the back, last pass, kind of those moves. He isn't quite as dynamic as James Tedesco, dynamic as in speed and agility, but he is the most similar player in the NRL to Roger Tuivasa Sheck. Like, you can just see with his bounce and his side steps and his stature that being so close to Tuivasa Sheck has rubbed off on him in more ways than one. But no one, like, again, going back to those stats, like, he still has try assists, not huge numbers, but he's the same numbers, still makes line breaks. He has added run meters to his performances from last season. So somehow, well, not somehow, but he's got better as there is more understanding of who he is and what he does, because he was kind of an unknown quantity as a fullback last season. So that's real special as well. How are you So what are you thinking for Rabbitohs Panthers? You're thinking Panthers. What are you thinking for Storm versus Raiders here, wildcard? This one's a tricky one.
It's a very tricky one, I probably tempted just to stick with Storm and play it safe and say the old week off will reap benefits and etc., but I mean, at this point I kind of feel like it's a bit of a toss of the coin because the Raiders are also coming in on big momentum and that leads to big belief and confidence in those things, which is often like one of those factors that gets slept or it either gets slept on or it gets completely overrated. Like there's kind of two sides of the coin there, but when you're rolling in the playoffs, like there's a notable feeling to it, like that you get, and it's the kind of thing that can be shut down straight away. Like I mean, even in that Eels Bunnies game, there was that little spell where the Eels scored like 3 quick tries, and it just felt like they were absolutely rolling there, and then suddenly they weren't anymore, and they never got that back. Like it can be a fickle thing, but where the Raiders are poised right now, I also don't want to pick against them. So I don't know. I'll be perfectly happy to go into that game just as a wide-eyed neutral, being like, this is going to be extremely enjoyable, and I don't even want to cloud that enjoyment with any thoughts.
I think there's if there's one team who the Storm have to be fully equipped. They'll probably need Dale Finucane. They'll probably need Cameron Munster, players with a bit of an injury cloud. But if there's a team with the forward pack who can slow down the Raiders forward pack, it is the Storm. If there's a team who can put Jack Wyden under a bit of pressure on that left edge and somehow rattle him off his best performance, it's going to be the Storm. If there's a team who can control the tempo, the pace of the game, and dictate proceedings, because I think that's what the Raiders like to do. They like to, most teams are going to want to play their game and play at their speed. I think the Storm are the better team as far as bumping the opponent off their tempo. But there is that wave of momentum with the Raiders as well. I'm going to go with the Storm. But yeah, it's going to be a humdinger. Bit of a humdinger there on the Friday night, followed by Panthers versus Rabbitohs. We'll roll into some Plunket Shield cricket here, wildcard. I've done plenty of writing about the Plunket Shield, just different bits and bobs, so go read about it. I'm curious here, wildcard, are there any individuals that you're really interested in seeing, or let me put it this way, scorecard check, who are you immediately checking on what they're doing, where they're batting, where they're bowling, their figures, which individuals are going to be must-see viewing for you on the scorecards?
Well, to be honest, the full 100 answer there is probably the fringe Black Caps guys that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, like your Glenn Phillipses and your Devon Conways and etc., and that's probably the first round, maybe even the first 2 rounds. I think there are going to be actual Black Caps available, the players who are still in the country right now and aren't at IPL or whatever. I'm pretty sure they are playing in the first couple rounds. So that's probably, to be honest, that's probably where the instant attention goes to. Beyond that, I mean, I've got some regional biases that lead me to want to see old Henry Cooper do well opening the batting for Northern as well. So there's probably that too. I mean, if he does, then he might put himself into that fringe Black Caps selection group as well. So there's a few different ones still, because we're very likely to see some pretty stacked lineups for the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I had a little brainstorm of a possible Central Districts Stags team, and I think I went with, obviously we have no idea who's fit and available, who's healthy, all that stuff, but I went with, what did I do? but a George Worker, Greg Hay, Will Young, Ross Taylor, Dane Cleaver, Doug Bracewell, Adam Milne, Ben Wheeler, Ajaz Patel, Blair Tickner, Seth Rance.
That's sizzling.
That's about as good a Plunket Shield team as you're going to get. The Northern Districts are probably going to be the most impacted because they'll have Trent Bolt, who's playing very good over in the IPL. Mitchell Santner should still be in the IPL. He hasn't played much, but he should be with his team. And who else?
Well, Kane Williamson.
Kane Williamson as well. So we're talking about all the Black Caps who are going to be playing. And Northern Districts tend to have the most Black Caps, but they're only useful if they are playing and they're too busy playing in the IPL. Henry Cooper's definitely an interesting batsman as far as someone who's suited to the longer format. And he'll be opening with Jet Raval wildcard, which will be an interesting combination as well. In the Plunket Shield, Jet Raval's obviously contending to try and get back in the mix for the Black Caps. And I'm curious as to his impact on Henry Cooper, because that could see Henry Cooper really flourish, having a super steady test match caliber opener alongside him. That's something to keep an eye on. A different one wildcard is, do you remember who Will Somerville is?
I think I've heard that name before somewhere.
That geezer. He played a test in Australia, and then he got injured in the back end of I think he got injured in the Super Smash, and then Auckland handed their spinning duties over to Lewis Delport, and Lewis Delport only played 3 games, and he finished 7th, tied for 7th in wickets, averaging 24.11. And in the first stanza of the Plunket Shield earlier in the summer, Will Somerville hadn't done anything. And then later on in the summer, I do remember there being some very favourable spin conditions, I think, in Auckland that may have helped Lewis Delport, but regardless, he was playing his first few games of Plunket Shield cricket, and he finished as the best spinner across the whole Plunket Shield. So suddenly Auckland have a situation where they're going to play, where Will Somerville and Lewis Delport are both competing for spinner spots. And then the spin landscape, the wider spin landscape will be interesting as well. I have noted that there is a lack of specialist young spinners. And then another layer to that is like funky spinners who just do something completely different with X Factor. There's not many of those around. However, you still have Ajaz Patel with the Stags. You're going to have Ish Sodhi with the Knights, I think, in the first round, or at least the first few games. Will Somerville's, in theory, he should get the starting role over Lewis Delport for Auckland, but he's got to get that role first. Todd Astle retired from red ball cricket, so he's not going to be there. Do you have any thoughts on how the spinners rank? Because Ajaz Patel finished the summer. He didn't do anything against India, but he did finish the summer as the number 1 test spinner.
From memory, I think a lot of the top spinners struggled, I was trying to think back.
Yeah, I've got the Plunket Shield stats here, wildcard. Ish Sodhi averaged 80. Todd Astle averaged 53. Mitchell Santner averaged 57. I think Will Somerville averaged 60 or something, just in the Plunket Shield. So those guys are all black cap spinners who averaged at least 50 in domestic cricket. That's it alone. That's notable, but, it might have been green seamers all the way around. However, you also have other spinners like Lewis Delport. Ajaz Patel was pretty handy. Michael Rippon was amazing with his lefty leggies. So you had other spinners doing a pretty nice job, while the black cap spinners couldn't contribute as they would have liked.
And the other wrinkle to that is that, like, not just those sort of lesser known spinners who were sort of emerging at that time to do well at a time when a lot of the Black Caps, although I suppose a lot of the Black Caps probably only played the start of the season as well. So maybe, like, the conditioned aspect of it probably is a factor. Wickets generally you would expect, especially because there was a bloody drought in the North Island at the start of the year. So you would expect, like, wickets to get drier and dustier and a little more favourable towards spin as the season progresses. And remember, we didn't get the last 2 rounds as well because bloody COVID happened. So there's that. But I also, like, last season we did also see a lot of, like, where the top tier spinners weren't doing particularly well, a lot of, like, part-timers were getting those overs instead because, well, if they're not getting the wickets, at least we can go through the... Like, I remember Glenn Phillips suddenly starting to bowl a lot, and someone like, I think Michael Bracewell got a lot of overs in and picked up some handy wickets along the way. Like, there just seemed to be I mean, I don't even know if there's rhyme or reason behind it. I mean, there's various, like, probably big old mixing pot of complicated reasons involved, some of which we've already, like, mentioned here, but spin in general, just last season, domestically, and then maybe that feeds into, like, the fact that the Black Cap spin stocks were in a bit of maybe a little less confusing now that Todd Astle's retired from Red Bull stuff, and like, AJS Patel seems to probably be the Black Caps number one. I don't know where Mitchell Santner sits in that stack anymore, but, like, there was a lot of confusion at the Black Caps level too, and then those guys all seemed to come here and struggle. And then when spinners weren't taking wickets, part-timers were therefore doing just as well as them and being able to get through overs at, like, just quick paces and whatever, and snatching the odd wicket themselves at lesser expectations. I don't know. There's just, in general, just spin bowling seemed to be extremely weird last summer. So I don't know where that leaves us this time around, but it will be pretty interesting to see.
So we had Astle, Sodhi, Santner, and Somerville all averaging over 50. These are spinners who took more wickets than those Black Cap spinners and averaged under 30. So we have Brad Schmullian, one of the favourites of the niche cache. He's a leggy for Central Districts. Fantastic with the bat as well, but he probably won't make their first 11. He averaged 24 with his leggies. Dean Foxcroft, offie. Batsman, offie. All of these dudes are, as you alluded to, batsmen who probably bowl a bit. So Dean Foxcroft, 26 with the ball. Michael Bracewell, 22 with the ball. Theo Van Workum, specialist spinner for Canterbury, so keep an eye on him. He is a bit younger. He's the only younger one. 22 with the ball. Joseph Walker, specialist spinner for Northern Districts, but if you got Ish Sodhi, he might not play so much, but he averaged 20 with the ball. Michael Rippon, 23. Malcolm Knopfel, 16. So as you alluded to there, Wildcard, everyone else was fine. Everyone else was pretty good in spinning the ball on a cricket pitch. The Black Cap spinners, not so much. It was, very strange. Very strange indeed. And I think that's going to be my next little thing to write about leading into the first round of Plunket Shield is touching on that spinner factor there. Is there a seamer wildcard who you're going to pay attention to? Because Kyle Jamieson came out of nowhere, kind of. Like, if you're really tapped into, like, New Zealand A games and domestic cricket, you've seen Kyle Jamieson for a while now. But if you're just following the Black Caps, he came out of nowhere. At the same time, Matt Henry fell out of the Black Caps. Like, Kyle Jamieson effectively took Matt Henry's place in the Black Caps rankings. Are there any other seamers who you could see exploding into Black Caps contention? Because you've got guys like Doug Bracewell with the Stags, Adam Milne with the Stags, Matt Henry with Canterbury will probably be pretty excited to have a massive summer and remind everyone that he still exists. Otago have Jacob Duffy, who's a young soldier of the Otago Volts setup, and he finished as the leading wicket taker in the Plunket Shield last summer, so he's coming in with a bit of form. Blair Tickner's someone else to watch with the Stags, because he averaged just 25 in the Plunket Shield last season, and that was notable because he's usually viewed in the 2020 sphere. Ben Sears is someone who Devon Conway mentioned as the fastest bowler in New Zealand, and he's got an excellent record as a young seamer. Lockie Ferguson made his test debut, but broke down injured. So he's probably in the IPL, but he's another one who has been fantastic in Plunket Shield cricket for a long time now, and he deserves that test spot. However, Kyle Jamieson snapped up that opportunity. So there's a lot of seamers who are on that Black Caps fringe. Who are you most confident in as someone who can firmly entrench themselves in that Black Caps squad? Because that was Matt Henry, right? Matt Henry was always the next tier seamer. So it's not necessarily like who's going to, knock Tim Southee out of the Black Caps seam attack. It's not about that. It's about Matt Henry was in the squad every time. He's lost that, and Kyle Jamieson kind of took it last summer on the field as a player. But if you've got a full-strength Black Caps team and you're playing with Ajaz Patel, Kyle Jamieson will probably drop out and he'll be in the squad. So who in that kind of bracket of maybe we're going to play four seamers and Colin de Grandhomme, who's your fourth seamer? But if we're playing three seamers, Colin de Grandhomme and Ajaz Patel, this seamer is in the squad. Regardless, they're always in the squad. So that's a very convoluted question. So I'll just give you the list of players to select from here. You're looking at Kyle Jamieson, Matt Henry, Lockie Ferguson, maybe Doug Bracewell, Blair Tickner, Adam Milne, Matt Henry, I think I mentioned, Jacob Duffy as well, maybe. Like, who of those seamers are you picking as someone to, just really nail their spot into the Black Caps squad?
I mean, that's like, it sort of depends on which angle I want to take on whether, like, if it's up to me, that's probably Lockie Ferguson. If it's up to the Black Caps, it probably is just Matt Henry again. Like, he might have dropped down the rankings a little bit, but all he's got to do is come in and bowl very well in the first couple rounds of the Plunket Shield, and he's back in the mix. So it sort of feels like the Black Caps thing to do is decide with the veteran who's played a few times before, who's been a part of the group. That would be the least surprising option. I mean, Lockie Ferguson's in that group too because of his, his first 11 for the ODI team. So that's a decent start. If we want to get a little bit sneakier with it, though.
Wait, hold on. Do you have those guys ahead of Kyle Jamieson?
I have them in an even par, I think.
So who's your pick?
Ugh. Well, I mean, again, like going with Black Caps selector trends, it's probably Jamieson because he bats the best out of them. So if you need a tiebreaker, you pick the least relevant stat. That's generally how they've picked their spin bowlers, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they did for that. I think it's that group just below that that's most interesting, though, where you've got guys like, Blair Tickner's a player I like what I see from him when I've watched him play. I'm not sure he's fully delivered on that, but that might just mean he's set for a breakout year this time around. Jacob Duffy is also a player who feels like, I don't know, he's definitely not in that tier with those other dudes because they're experienced international players at this point. Like even Jamison's had success at an international level, which you gotta like respect. Duffy just feels like a guy who should be in that conversation for the next ones coming through. I'm not sure he has been yet, but maybe that's because this is the year again. And then getting extremely sneaky with it. We're a year or two off from this happening on a Black Caps level, but I'm very excited about what Ben Sears can do. I think he had, let me check his crick info because I looked it up before. I think he was Auckland, was it? He took here we 6 for 43 he got against Auckland in a first class game last season. So, he hasn't got buckets of wickets all over. He's only, I think, played about 5 first-class games, but he's very fast. I didn't realize he was as quick as Devon Conway says he was, but that's also nice to see. And just when you're talking about, what separates guys at that level below, I think that X factor that you mentioned that seems to be lacking from the spin options, the second-tier spin options, I think, extreme pace is always an X factor. Obviously, the next step is to learn what to do with it, and Lockie Ferguson's a good example of someone who knows how to bowl as a fast bowler that doesn't just rely on his pace. So we're a couple years away from Ben Sears doing that. But I mean, some of the short stuff he's served up, even just in his short career, terrifying, and that is extremely mouth-watering to think about where he might go from that point onwards. Especially if you're bowling to Devon Conway in the nets quite often. I doubt he gets to deal with the short stuff in the net sessions. That would just be cruel. But, I mean, there's a nice way to start. He's already playing for the defending champion Plunket Shield team. So I would like to see a nice old breakout season from that fella. I think he's nicely poised there, which sort of sets you up for 1, 2, and 3 tiers on that question. I'm not sure if that counts as an answer or not.
All right, so a couple of thoughts stemming from that. How good is it to have Kyle Jamieson, Ben Sears, Lockie Ferguson coming from New Zealand?
Extremely
good. Where we grew up with, Michael Mason, Kyle Mills, those sorts of military medium Kiwi seamers.
Daryl Tuffy.
All 130. Daryl Tuffy, good soldiers for Aotearoa cricket. Not the most exciting, right? Now we've got Neil Wagner fizzing and frothing all over the show. You've got Lockie Ferguson, Ben Sears, Kyle Jamieson, guys with a bit of point of difference to what they do. That's exciting. Ben Sears' career stats, he's played 5 first-class games, 10 List A games and 5 T20s, and he averages below 30 in all 3 formats. So obviously there's varying degrees, he averages 29.5 in List A cricket and he averages 18.6 in T20 cricket. But the easy way to package it, young dude, early in his career, averaging under 30 in every format. Compare that to Blair Tickner. Blair Tickner only averages under 30 in T20 cricket. He averages 38 in both first class and List A cricket. So that's just an interesting gauge or comparison for context with regards to how I view bowling averages and bowlers based on their stats. But that's what made Blair Tickner's Plunket Shield work last season notable in my eyes, is because he has first-class bowling average of 38, but somehow there was something different last season in the Plunket Shield where he took 18 wickets at an average of 25. So I don't know if Blair Tickner has the juice to steam through a whole Plunket Shield campaign averaging 25 again, but that's something interesting to keep an eye on. Very, very much so indeed there.
Well, the other thing as well to consider with all these dudes is that, this is like the week of draws, eh? We started off talking about, actually that was in the Patreon pod, but we started off talking on the Patreon exclusive about how the All Blacks had a draw, and then we had the 2 Premiership draws we talked about before, and now there's a Plunket Shield draw, and the New Zealand cricket draw, I think, came out last week, and amongst that, the international schedule draw, a lot of stuff involving Black Caps playing T20 games and whatever, and not a lot of ODIs, and we've discussed this last week. There is also sneakily, though, quite a lot of New Zealand A cricket. Like, I think West Indies and Pakistan both have games. In fact, they're even sort of like, some of them are classed as West Indies A, I think. Like, there's quite a few. Like, there's a decent little run of the games for those players that we're talking about who might not be Black Caps' immediate squad if everyone's healthy, but are trying to knock down that door to get there. Like, there is actually, it's not just Plunket Shield as well. There's a lot of those where they'll actually get to play against like international caliber players too. And that is why those games are always quite exciting. And the cool thing about them as well is they take them around the regions. So like there's a couple in Whangarei. I think there's games in Nelson there, and pretty sure Lincoln's got some. Lincoln's got a lot of cricket coming up this summer based on the draw. So like those are a lot of my opinions on fringe players comes from having watched them like play in those kind of games where I can actually go to them and have a little look-see. But yeah, there's a decent amount of New Zealand A cricket coming up on the schedule, which is opportunities for all these fellas, and also not just for them, but also opportunities to see like what the actual probably more importantly actually, to see what the actual Black Caps selectors are thinking. Like, who do they consider to be the group below the group? Because that's where we get that kind of indication.
Here's a fun one to finish with. If you could guarantee one thing, whether it's a batsman scoring runs or a bowler taking wickets from the first round of Plunket Shield cricket, what would you guarantee?
Do you mean what would I want to see, or what do I expect to see?
Definitely the expect to see route, but if maybe it's Stephen Fleming is definitely scoring a 50 this week to start the summer. Maybe it's Shane Bond's definitely taking 3 wickets in both innings. Like, is there something that you just can guarantee is going to happen in Plunket Shield round 1?
Right, well, round 1, we're talking early season wickets. We're talking probably, I mean, it's been raining all day where I am. It sounds like it's been raining around a lot of the country. That sounds like who's the 2020 Michael Mason? He's taken a 5 for whoever that is. Maybe Matt Henry. I think maybe Matt Henry's going to come in real strong and take a 5 for in the first. I don't want to get too specific, but let's say in the first day of the first game, if they bowl first innings of the season, he's going to come in. Well, I won't say 5. We'll hedge my bets and say 4. I think wickets for Matt Henry feels about right based on what I'm seeing when I look out my window.
Like 4 wickets in the first game, or 4 wickets in his first bowling innings?
First bowling innings. I'm coming in hot here. I reckon I'm getting some very short. Oh wait, which one is which? Very long odds on that one at the TAB, but I'm in for a penny, in for a pound.
It's hard to go with a batsman because like I'm imagining the seam bowlers throughout Aotearoa rather excited to get a bit of a new ball action going on in these conditions. I'm going to pluck something out of nowhere, and I'm going to say Mark Chapman will score a 50 in the first game. So you're saying Matt Henry is going to take 4 wickets in the first innings against Wellington at the Basin Reserve, and I'm saying that Mark Chapman is going to score a 50 against the Otago Volts in either innings at Eden Park.
I have a better one, Chuck, as a side one. Who do you say Canterbury are playing at the Basin against Wellington? I'll say whoever bats first is going to be bowled out for less than 200.
Yeah, that's a little less dramatic and exciting than picking the player, but I'll give it to you.
It's my backup.
Yeah, well, it's not
because I think the one that I said probably isn't going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. I'm not sure if Mark Chapman's going to score. It's pretty ballsy to guarantee a batsman in October scoring a 50, but I'm doing it with Mark Chapman, of all batsmen. So, shout out to Mark Chapman. Come home for me, boy. Score a 50, first round.
I would love to see him scoring runs too, because he's a great batsman to watch when he gets going.
Definitely is indeed, and we haven't seen him in the black cap for a while now. Well, might wrap it up there. another episode of the Niche Cast. If you do want to listen to our All Blacks chat, jump on Patreon. That's all there. And every week before this episode, before we record the podcast, we will do a Patreon half hour or so just to chew the fat there. Keep reading all the good Kiwi sports content. If you do love the domestic cricket in Aotearoa, you know we're all here for it. Otherwise, just stay beautiful. Kia kaha. Chit-chit.